Welcome to the Miko Peled podcast. I'm your host, Jamil, and I am a diaspora Palestinian living in the U.S. My father's side of the family is from Mzera, a village not far from Lid that was destroyed and depopulated in 1948 by early Zionist militias. And my mom's side of the family is from Rentis, a really small West Bank village that still stands today. So I am a friend and colleague of Miko's, and I pretty much help him out by putting these episodes together while he kind of goes out into the world after being invited to speak to various organizations and various audiences. Miko also regularly returns home to Israel and Palestine and links up with friends and fellow activists, and that's really where the idea for this whole podcast stems from. Why wouldn't we take the opportunity to record a lot of these conversations, ones that feature both well-known and unknown individuals who all have something in common. They're all fighting for Palestinian justice, freedom, and dignity in their own respective ways and in their own respective communities. So for those who might not be really familiar with Miko Peled, he is an Israeli-American author, speaker, and human rights activist who lives in Washington, D.C. He's considered by many to be a really clear voice calling for justice in Palestine, but also supporting the Palestinian call for Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions, or BDS. And he also advocates for the creation of a single democracy with equal rights in all of historic Palestine. Miko is probably best known for his book, The General's Son, Journey of an Israeli Living in Palestine, which is an autobiographical work that takes the reader through his life, what was a very patriotic Israeli family, one that included even a signee on the Israeli Declaration of Independence. But there's also his father, who was, obviously by the title, a very famous general in the Israeli army. But when a really personal family tragedy struck Miko and the rest of his family, he kind of took him on a journey to explore Palestine, explore its people, and understand that narrative. And that's really what led him to where he is today, someone who is a staunch activist for Palestinian freedom and liberation. So anyway, this podcast has a really simple premise. What we're trying to accomplish here is to highlight and bring to you those Palestinian experiences, those viewpoints, and those resistance efforts that go underreported in a lot of our current media landscape. I mean, to be honest, essentially all of it. But even among some of the more niche independent media that covers Israel and Palestine, tends to be a focus on a lot of more macro issues. So this is something a little more personal, a bit more one-on-one. And over the years, Miko has made a lot of friends and has a lot of colleagues working in the region and outside of it. And this gives him access to individuals who are working on the ground. I mean, we're talking about people who are fighting for access to water, people who are resisting home demolitions, people who are resisting an end to IDF brutality. Basically, anyone who has the most at stake in all of this. And what Miko is trying to capture from those folks is a really honest and unfiltered insight into what regular Palestinians are experiencing in the face of Israeli state violence, and also zooming out a little bit, just the really shattering effects that stem from the greater project of Zionism. So that's what this is all about, the ability to share that access with you all, bringing the voices of brave human rights defenders directly to you. That's what the Miko Peled podcast is going to be all about. Recently, Miko took a trip to Palestine to see friends and catch up with various resistance movements. And while there, he met up with a really good friend of his, Bassem Tamimi. And for those who don't know Bassem, he is a prominent Palestinian leader from the village of Nabi Saleh, and one of the leaders of the popular resistance movement, as well as a proponent of one democratic state in a free Palestine. A lot of people have come to know about Bassem Tamimi through the imprisonment of his daughter, Ahed Tamimi, who famously slapped an IDF soldier across the face, and that video went viral, and all sorts of both good faith and bad faith attention was sort of forced upon the Tamimi family But anyway, the important thing, the long game of all this about Bassem is that he is someone who has been resisting Israeli aggression his entire life. And I could be wrong about this, but I don't believe there is a member of his family who has not been incarcerated and detained by the Israeli state. So these are truly people who give their all to their cause and continue to show resilience in securing freedom for themselves, for the village of Nabi Saleh, for the Palestinian people, all the way from 48 to the West Bank, to Gaza, to refugees around the world, and even to those living in the diaspora. But before we get into Miko and Bassem's conversation, I want to shout out some of Miko's upcoming speaking dates that are all occurring here in March. So on March 2nd, we've got Nevadans for Palestinian Human Rights is bringing Miko out for an evening with Miko Peled, the General's son. That's going to be at the Cohen Theater at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. March 4th, Jewish Voice for Peace presents an evening with Miko Peled. That is going to be at the All Souls Episcopal Church in San Diego. March 5th, the very next day, Students for Justice in Palestine at University of California, San Diego presents an evening with Miko Peled at the Great Hall at the university at UCSD. So if you're in the San Diego area, you got your March 4th Jewish Voice for Peace event, you got your March 5th SJP event. What I would recommend is if you're in the area, choose whichever one is going to be more convenient for you, day-wise, location-wise, and whatnot. I think they're kind of on opposite ends of town, if I'm not mistaken. And then the last one I'll say is March 10th. We've got the Institute for Retired Persons presents The Key to Peace in Israel and Palestine with Miko Peled. That one is going to be at the Wilson College Science Center in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. Now on to the conversation between Miko Peled and Bassem Tamimi as they sat down together in the West Bank village of Nabi Saleh to discuss the current state of resistance and what a just future must contain for Palestinians.
We're sitting here in Nabi Saleh at the home of Bassem Tamimi, and we just had a meeting here with some activists from all across Palestine, from the north, from Al Jalil, from everywhere else, discussing Palestine, discussing the future, discussing the possibilities. And just a few minutes after our meeting ended, the army decided to close down the village. And so they put down the roadblock and they closed the gate, which of course led to the youth in the village to protest. And now for the last few hours, the army's been shooting and the clashes have been going on, and we can hear the shooting from here. So as with all of this in the background, Bassem, I wanted to ask you, we sat here 2 years ago and Ahed and Nariman, your wife and your daughter, were in prison. And we talked about the different possibilities and the different difficulties. Now 2 years later, we're still discussing and there are still clashes. So what are your thoughts?
I think it's a hard situation and a hard time in our life. And because I feel the people start losing hope and they don't trust what the world talking about peace. The peace concept is harmed, and the meaning of peace is harmed by the mentality of the people and the feeling of the people. And because after the peace and the peace process, we lost more and more people and land. And now when the century deal declared that everything to Israel, it's mean that we waste time during that time. Since Oslo agreement until now, we are living in illusion, and we must stop thinking in the same way. We feel that the two-state solution is destroyed under the bulldozer of the Israeli settler, and also in the Israeli diplomacy by supporting of Trump when he declared Quds as a capital of Israel, and Jordan Valley, everything is. For that we need to rechange our thought to think in a new meaning and new goal. I think the people will not go fighting against the Israeli occupation under the law ceiling that comes from the Palestinian Authority, which talk about negotiation and the two-state solution, because it's loses. I think it's loses.
We talked about this a few years ago. That you hosted a conference here in Nabi Saleh.
Yeah.
And the title of the conference was Occupation is the Enemy of Faith, of Religion.
Of religion.
And we talked about, and I mentioned that I thought the problem is not the occupation.
Because the occupation has the name.
Exactly, the occupation has a name, and that name is Israel. And the problem, of course, is not only in the occupation since 1967, but it's all of Palestine since 1948, and probably even before. And we need to, like you say, if we're talking about new thinking, and we're realizing that talking about just the occupation and the two-state solution is only serving Israel, because Israel takes more and more and more, and every time there's some kind of a peace deal, it's giving Israel more. So Oslo gave Israel a lot, which of course that's why it didn't work, and now the deal of the century has really given Israel everything, yeah. And the settlement across the street on Nabi Saleh land, and the settlement over there, and everywhere we look there's settlements, and they're all on Palestinian land. So the new approach, a different approach, needs to be more inclusive, including all of Palestine. So how do we do that?
As you said, I think the new colonization fragmenting the mentality of the people and change their priorities. For that, they took us from talking about the central goal, which is the colonization, and the Israeli colonization, the Zionism colonization project, which named Israel, which is one settlement. I think it's one settlement in our land. And to talk about Halmish, which is the shape of the problem, not the problem itself. To talk about the detail, the checkpoint. The issue is not the checkpoint or Halmish. The issue of the colonization.
Halmish is the settlement right here.
And also, sometimes Abu Mazen talk about we are not against Jewish, we are against Zionism. We don't need to talk to say that. We don't need to. We are nobody. Why we feel that we must talk about this idea? We are against Judaism. We are against Zionism. The Zionism represents Judaism for me as occupation. For that, who is responsible to convince me that Zionism is different from Judaism is the Jewish people, not me. Why all the time the people want to blame the Palestinian, that they're talking about Judaism and Zionism? We can't. For the previous generation, they can't distinguish between the two concepts of Judaism and Zionism. Now, the rule or the responsibility for the Jewish, as my land is occupied, the religion also is occupied.
Yes.
If Judaism is ethnicity, I am the Jewish, not this colonization.
What do you mean if Judaism is an ethnicity, then you're Jewish? What do you mean by that?
Because if the reality say that if it's happened that the son of Israel had been here in Palestine, they are my grandparents, not their grandparents.
Yes.
For that, and also it's a religion, we had been Jewish, then Christian, then Muslim, and after that we will be Buddhist. I don't care. For that, also they want to, as we said there, they want to change the narrative, opposite the narrative.
Of course.
And they want to show that we are colonized their land.
Yes.
Not the real meaning that they make an ethnic cleansing, genocide in Palestine, to create Israel. And you show me some picture of Jaffa in different period of time.
Yes.
That shows how it's ethnic cleansing, that it's genocide, that they destroy everything.
Yes.
And now you don't see, you can't recognize that under this green,
a park basically.
Grass at the park, there is a home, a demolished houses, a history of the people, the memory of some refugees who lives maybe in Manhattan or in another place.
Or in a refugee camp.
In a refugee camp, yes. But despite he living in Manhattan or in a refugee camp, he has a right to return.
Of course.
It's not mean suffering. We are not asking for our يعني, human need. We went to our national rights.
Yes.
And because of human need, we can't take it without يعني, feel pity for me. I don't want you to feel pity for me. I want you to be partner with me in our struggle for our humanity.
Of course, and that's the problem. They say that the Palestinians have to recognize the difference between Zionism and Judaism. And not to say the Yahud, but the issue is the Jews who claim to themselves to be Jews and represent all Jews came to this land, took the country, destroyed Palestine, forced Palestinians into refugee camps. They are the ones who are flying the airplanes that drop the bombs in Gaza. They're the soldiers that keep 2 million people in Gaza in a prison, and they're the soldiers over there now shooting your children as they've been doing for years, as we sit and talk here. So,
and I saw the soldiers praying, holding the Torah and praying when he's shooting the people in Gaza.
Yeah.
And they want me not to talk about Judaism.
Yes, so Jews have to stand up if they are not
always
happy
have
with
to
this.
stand up.
We have Jewish people have to
By
stand
their
up and
name,
say,
we are suffering.
yeah. And some Jews do it. We know that Neturei Karta and others do stand up, but it's a small.
Some groups are
Yeah.
they are fighting for their religion to take it back.
Yes.
Also, not the Judaism. Also, Islam is occupied and took from the ISIS and all the terroristic group.
And Saudi Arabia, yes.
Everyone, the Wahhab, everything. It's not the real Islam.
Yes.
Yeah. As the Christianity took by the Crusades, used by the Crusade and KK and all of these groups.
Yes. So if we're going to change the mentality and we're going to change the conversation and the point of view, then we need to find a way to bring unity to all of Palestine again.
Yes.
Because I think originally, until 1967, most people talked about the refugee problem. After 1967, they talked about the West Bank and Gaza and the Palestinians who live there. Now, of course, nobody talks about the real reality in Palestine, which is that there are refugees, then there are people in Gaza and the West Bank, and then there are citizens of Israel, and there are all these different levels of existence for Palestinians. And they're still Palestinians, but like you say, they're fragmented. Everybody has their own problems, and the problem
They
is
push us on the detail.
And exactly, and then what we want to do is create some kind of a unity so that we can all act together for a free Palestine, which sounds like a big thing, but it's really very simple.
If you did read the century, the deal of the century, that they talk about the right to return of refugees. That if Israel allow the Palestinian to bring to what they name this is Palestine, some refugees.
Yes.
Also not for their land, to what they want to give to what they named it the Palestinian
the
state.
Palestine state, yes.
And also for water, they took our underground water and take it, and they will allow us and give us a project to for the sewage water.
Yes. Desalinization.
Desalinization
Yes.
of the sewage water. What's that? Yani how all this racism in the mentality, this superiority that they have to gain everything and don't give anything, and we must kiss their hands and say thanks.
Yes.
Thanks for our suffering. Thanks for it, that you. Yani, but I think it's when every civilization or power in the world, when the main value of the civilization and it become power, it's the center value, and everything around this central value, the civilization start declining.
Yes.
Since the Roman, the
Well, it's
Crusades, the
fascism,
Pharaoh,
really.
all these mentality.
Yeah.
Now USA and Israel, they feel had the power, and their value, they don't care. When you don't think when you think by your power, you don't use your mind. You seem stupid.
Yes.
If you heard Trump, you feel he's stupid.
Yes.
When he is talking about that, he wants to draw the map for everyone, not just for Palestinian.
Yes.
The main part of the deal of the century, that it comes over the international law.
Yes.
And this the new time, the first time that legitimize something over the international law.
And it started with Jerusalem. It
with
started with recognizing Jerusalem.
It started with Jerusalem.
That's a huge violation of international law.
For that, maybe they will do it in Iran, in Saudi Arabia, in any place.
Yes.
They say make the same.
Yes.
They bring for the Kurdish. Maybe they make the same idea for the Kurdish or everyone, because they want to not to change the Palestinian map. They want to change the world map.
Yes. Yes, and this mentality of power and power and power and more power and taking and taking and taking. At the same time, today the population in Palestine is 3 million people in the West Bank, 2 million people in the Gaza Strip, and 2 million citizens of Israel. Right around that. So that's a majority compared to the Israeli Jewish population. And when you listen to the conversation on the Israeli side, there is no recognition of any of this. And whatever elections they have again and again and again in Israel, this influences the life here. But of course, you can't vote. You don't have a say you don't have a voice in any of these decisions that take place on your land, in your life, your children's future.
I think it's not our dignity and our freedom.
Yeah.
I think the colonization, they took the geography of Palestine, the land. Now they are dealing with the demography.
Yes.
If the deal of the century, they want to push part of the resident of this 1948, push them to what they named it the Palestinian bandostans.
Yes.
To make a bandostant in Al-Muthallath.
Yeah.
And make it related with Palestine.
They actually listed the names of 10 Palestinian towns where they are Israeli citizens, and they want to change the border and make them as part of the West Bank, basically.
It's an ethnic cleansing.
Completely, yes.
They are around 500,000 persons.
Yes.
That mean that they deal with the demography now. All their policy is to put the Palestinian to bandostans by law, by the message of peace, what they named it, the deal of century, Trump, Netanyahu, what they want to name it. But what they are focused, the main thing that they want to isolate the Palestinian to several bandostans. I think the Palestinian Authority, they want to change the meaning of the Palestinian. They don't want to continue the Palestinian Authority as it is, to be centralized. They want to also to fragmenting the power of the authority, to make different municipality, big municipality like Nablus, Ramallah, Hebron, all of that, because when you talk about the authority as center and there is a president, maybe they are start talking about peace and the process and rights, in some way, but they want to just the Palestinians talk about need and want in the daily life. For that, I think there is no president after Abu Mazen. By their interest mean that they don't want somebody to talk about anything. Abu Mazen don't talk about full rights or some rights.
Yes.
Also, they don't accept.
Yes.
How I can convince my daughter to fight under the same political project, which is the two-state solution. I fight. I had been in jail. I was injured. I was tortured. I lost my relative and my cousin and my sister in the fighting for the two-state solution. How can I convince the new generation to repeat the same experience and suspect different result as we gain?
Yes.
And once Ahed told me something, if I will die, struggle and die and killed and go to jail and injured and lose part of my family for the 22% of Palestine, I will fight for the 100%.
Might as well fight for everything, of course.
For everything.
Fight for the whole thing.
Because the same price.
Yes.
The same price.
Yes.
But in that same price, I will be more protecting my dignity and my rights. Yes. This is mean that the new generation will be more يعني patient and more strong in front of their rights.
Yeah. And demand everything they deserve.
Yeah.
And really they deserve. There's no reason why they can't go to the beach and to Jerusalem and live in Palestine, regarding all of Palestine as their country, which it is. And so that should be the goal, I think, certainly, to take down all the barriers between all the different parts of Palestine, barriers that Israel created between the West Bank and the not West Bank and this and Jerusalem and that, and everybody lives under different laws, and to dismantle this Zionist racist state and allow for real democracy with equal rights for everyone. There's no other solution.
I think no other, يعني, to remove the occupation from and the colonization from the mentality.
Yes.
The problem is the colonization project.
Yes.
I am here and you are here in the same place, same house, the same feeling, the same gas, the same tea, and nothing. I don't see there is differentiation between and you. The differentiation comes from thought.
Yes.
We change our thought. That's what's happened.
Yes.
Because and for that we come together. Because in general the human being is searching for dignity and freedom in general.
And they try to separate us because I can get in the car and go to Jerusalem, but I can't take you with me.
You drink my tea, but I can't.
But you can't come to my house to drink my tea,
Yeah,
exactly,
yes.
or bring me a watermelon. Yes.
When they ask me about why one state solution, I told them because my son like to go to beach.
Yes.
Take 30 kilometers.
Yes.
If I am under my roof, I see the beach, but I can't go there.
Yes.
Why? Why? That's some simple issue.
It's a simple issue, but that's life.
That's the life.
Life is made of these simple issues. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. We'll continue the conversation another time.
Thanks for tuning in to the first episode of the Miko Peled podcast. We've got a lot more interviews and analysis in store for you, so stick with the podcast. We're trying to get out a couple episodes per month in the beginning here, and then I hope we can ramp that up a bit over time. If I could ask you all a favor, please rate and review the Miko Peled podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Google, whatever podcast app you like. Doing this allows the podcast to be heard by more people, and we're a brand new baby podcast, so we really need that right now, and we'd also just love your honest feedback as well. Please be sure to check out MikoPeled.com for a full list of Miko's speaking dates, articles that he's published. Join the Miko's email newsletter on the website, and if you want to order any of Miko's books, including his latest, Injustice, The Story of the Holy Land Foundation 5, you can find all that info on the website as well. If you have any questions for Miko, shoot those over to booking@MikoPeled.com. That's BOOKING. And we can try to get those answered on forthcoming episodes, do a little bit of a Q&A on here, and because we know that folks can't make it out to his speaking events. So we're happy to try and tackle some of your questions and thoughts right here on the podcast. And lastly, if you're interested in collaborating on an event with your group, let's say you're a Students for Justice Palestine group, or a church, or any other organization that's interested in Miko's point of view, we'd be happy to talk and see if we can work out an event together. Again, shoot me an email over at booking@MikoPeled.com. Till next time.